Hello, everybody, and welcome to Revive Stories. So good to have you check out this video today. And really, we hope it's going to be the beginning of quite a few videos. And what Revive Stories is all about is getting some of the amazing people in Revive Church and hearing a little bit about their story, how they came to know God and the role He's playing in their life today. Because we can be so inspired and encouraged by other people's stories. And today we got an amazing guest, Mr. Harker, who's joined us. Fantastic guy in our church. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing? You all right?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks for having me, Phil. Catching me on a good day. It's in between meetings and nothing too hectic. So we'll say it's a good day today.
Fantastic, man. Well, thanks, man. And yeah, really what we want to do today is just have a little discussion, a chat about your story. And you've been a part of our church for, a good few years now and very involved in our... Yeah, it's been long and very involved in our worship ministry and a blessing to our church. But like everybody, there's a journey and there's process. And we'd love to hear a little bit about your journey. And one of the first questions is maybe just how did you grow up? What was your upbringing like? And then maybe we can get our way to where church and Jesus comes in with that.
Yeah, super. Okay, so I grew up actually born in Joburg, which is not something that everybody actually does know. So born in Joburg.
I didn't know that.
In Boksburg, actually, to be very specific about that. Moved down to Cape Town when we were, 5, 6, so 90. What I always remember is 1994 World Cup is when we moved down. It was literally, I think, a week or two before the World Cup actually final happened, and we were in Cape Town. And for some reason, I vaguely remember us being at some sort of family or aunts around it. So yeah, anyway, so like that's when I know we came down to Cape Town, and yeah. I had a really good life, like growing up as a kid. Really great parents, but thankfully both parents are still alive, so get to be part of our lives all the day long and part of my kids all the day long with stuff. So moved down to Cape Town, went to Edgemead, so Edgemead Primary and Edgemead High, which I know can get a bit of dig some days because it's not a private school, it's the run-of-the-mill normal public school, and there have been many bad things that have happened in Edgemead, and there's been many good things that have happened in Edgemead. So wouldn't say that it was like the ultra privileged life, but it was a good like grounded type of lifestyle for stuff. And school was great. I was an avid cricketer, and I tried to be as long as I could into my adult life as well. But eventually, my body and time just gave up on me. I just wasn't able to do it as much as I wanted to, or at the speed I wanted to do it. Really had a good life in school and stuff. Didn't really know what God or Jesus was in those times at all. It was just not a conversation had with my parents or in school or anything at that stage. And often when it was brought up, it was through a friend, but it just kind of wasn't, I don't know, it just didn't really make sense to me then, or didn't really seem like something that was important to me.
So how did it, yeah, if I can interrupt you, how did it, when did it then start becoming a thing, or was it an invite? Was it a friend? How did that look
actually? So, I went to a couple of invites. So I remember going to a Catholic invite or something. Okay. I can't remember just like years and years ago now. So I can't remember. I think it was in Wordesworth. And I went there like I think twice, and I couldn't get into it. To be honest, it just didn't feel like I was connecting. Again, though, like at that stage, and I think contextually. If you're a kid that's kind of grown up and you've never had a conversation with your parents about God, right? Or that when something's going wrong or good, or like the conversation about God never comes up in your life, like you can't place like how does Jesus and God fit into your life if when your parents are talking to you or bringing you up, it never really becomes that conversation for it. So if I think of like my kids now, we pray every night together. If there's something that they're struggling with, we pray together through it. Like we actively pray through our struggles or through things we're dealing with, or sometimes when someone's dealing with something, we pray for them. Like it's an everyday conversation in our house, and that wasn't for me as a kid. So when I went to like a Catholic church, or when I went to Edge Church a couple of times, like for things, it just didn't feel like what I was looking for. So I never connected to it. I never got saved at that stage. Where it really became something, and it still wasn't the right area for me, was when I got married. So Chantal was at that stage old apostolic, so like old school, like real church type of stuff. And I thought the right thing to do was join church. I just felt like I'm marrying her. I should join church. Like, it just felt like the right thing to do. Again, I couldn't connect to it. Like, it just didn't. I couldn't understand it. I struggled with the messages. I struggled to feel how it was practical in my day-to-day life, and I struggled to feel a connection with God. Where it really came down was, and this is between Ava and Rebecca. We had a miscarriage between the two girls, and it was hectic. It was a really hard time for us in our lives with stuff. Chantal was a lot further down than you would ever. I mean, the miscarriage is never great, but like when it's 16 or 18 weeks, or I can't remember, I think it was even longer than that. Like, it's quite hectic. So it was past the risky stage. It kind of happened out of the blue. I never forget the phone call. I was sitting in a meeting in Old Mutual, and I got the phone call, and I was trying to like comprehend it. But at that stage, we were still half going to the Old Apostolic and half not sure where we were in life, to be honest. Like, it was, we were in a very gray area and stuff. Had the miscarriage. She received counseling to almost mourn it like loss of a child, which is what we did, and we did that. And then out of the blue, and I can't really pinpoint why, to what day, but we were driving past, because at that stage, View Church was in Arcana Primary School, or Arcana High School. Yeah. And she just, and she says to me, like when we got home, she says, I want to go to View Church next week Sunday. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, what's View Church? Like, I've been trying to try different churches with her for years now. We've been married and just never really could get past where we were. And it's out of the blue, it's like, I want to go to this new church. I just have a feeling that we should go there. And it's like, okay, well, we'll go. And went to Arcana, and to be honest, never looked back, right? It's just been part of that. It took me, it was the first place that I felt I could be myself, which I think was a big win for me first off. A small, maybe weird detail, but something that I think as a person that didn't grow up in a very church-related household, not a bad household, just wasn't church. Like, church wasn't a focus, God wasn't a focus. It was just, it was grounded on basic principles, but God wasn't a focus. Like, to go and be in an old style church, and rather than call it that, where everything is like, you have to dress a certain way. There's like very strict like procedures for stuff. Like, you had to do certain things and wear certain stuff and say certain stuff. I struggled with that because I was like, I can't imagine that this is the right way to kind of build a relationship with, at that stage, like this thing in the sky, which I don't know what was actually really happening with it. But then when I first started at View Church, I was like, I can just be me. I can be who I am. I can walk in, I can just have a conversation with somebody. And it was the good start. It was a start of our journey. We started coming more regularly, started to become friends then with actually Nikki and Richard Vogel. They were our first life group we joined. And I think within about a year is when I actually got baptized. Like,
amazing.
I made a commitment to God within that. And yeah, I mean, there's way more stories to come from that, but I don't want to just talk the whole time. You may have more questions to me, which might spur them on.
No,
but yeah, that was just when we started going to church, and when I committed to Jesus was within that first year of that stage was View Church.
Man, just encouraged by that. I think that's so normal, and I think it's so good for people to hear just how from any type of background, any type of upbringing, you can find God. And often, if your wife has a feeling about something, to run with it, because that kind of sounds like the deal. Maybe just to take it a little bit further. So obviously you came to church, you kind of had this sense of, cool, this is home. Like, I feel like myself here, connected. Did you start to see any kind of maybe changes in your life, in your family life, how you parented, how you worked, just as you were getting kind of closer to God and this relationship maybe developed further?
So yes, but there's a story to it, I think, also, and I kind of unpacking.
Let's hear the story. It's Revive Stories.
There was something that, I mean, we always talk about it, and I say we now, like in church specifically, right? When someone gives into their lives to God, and they make their commitments, like, I love that. I think this analogy you used, or Sven used one day, which was like, okay, you've made the commitment now, but it's not going to be magically better, like instantly, right? Actually, this is where the hard yards start. This is where it may sound daunting to anyone listening that goes like, well, I'm not a believer, and that just sounds terrible. But when I made the commitment to Jesus and I got baptized and I was like, great, this feels like the right thing. I did not know how hard it was going to be afterwards in following that path, right? Because there is quite a bit that you have to change personally in your life, in your family, if you truly are going to follow in the path of what we want to do as Christians and with Jesus, right? And to try and emulate how Jesus lived. It's a journey which you've got to take, right?
Yeah.
It started off great, and it felt like the right thing to do, and got involved at that stage of worship as well. So I started very much like starting with that, which is also really funny because I came from a background where I learned to play guitar, and I only learned to play heavy death metal. I never once picked up any even in the slightest.
So you weren't playing Hillsong's Oceans?
No, I was playing Slipknot and like Slayer. Like that was me, right? Like I was full on into that. I still listen to it every once in a while, but like that was all I played. And I never forget going to Adrian Thomas's house and for like practice rehearsals, and it just was like jarring. Like my head was just like, how am I going to do this? But it started a journey. I mean, actually even the reason why I play guitar is a whole nother story, but that's a whole nother thing which we can get into. But like, kind of starting that journey and kind of going through. It started going well, and then we hit a rocky patch. And I think context is important because I often find that people like go make a commitment to God or follow the Christian way, but when things start getting rocky, it's actually where the best work is done in your life, but you have to persevere through it. And like, that's really where the fruits of labor come through. So not to go to excruciating details, we had a rocky in our marriage, like things went a little bit south in some areas, and we got in a gray space of, we were going to church, we were life group, and we were worship, and we were committed, but we were in this gray space with like friends and stuff, and we just weren't really going into where we should be with things. And it kind of reached a boiling point where we had to make a commitment. Like, are we following this path or are we not? And it was quite like a pivotal moment in our lives and stuff. Thankfully, we decided to like fully put ourselves into that side of our world and following Jesus and following the Christian life. And that's where I started to see the biggest impact. It's when we totally did that, when we went full into it.
That's brilliant.
There's a great song, I can't think of the name of it now, but it often talks about like going full in, like your whole body and everything goes in. And there's even a message I watched in Planet Shakers, it was 3 or 4 years ago, where this was really one of the turning points for me. Was like when you wade into the commitment with God, it's when you go ankle deep, like it makes a small amount of change. When you go knee deep, it's kind of wrestling things up. It doesn't really push you. When you submerge yourself, that's when you make a change. That's when you're fully committed and things can change in life. And when we did that, it was hard because it pushed people out of our lives, but it brought new people into our lives. It's created a dynamic in our families, which we had to kind of come to terms with, because they started to see a shift in us, which was uncomfortable for some, but comfortable for others. But where it started to make positive gains was in our relationship as a husband and wife. Things were a lot more connected and a lot more aligned. It started to make it positive in our children, who loved church, but we weren't really following through in the day-to-day of it, like talking about God at home, speaking about it, reading the Bible together, like making it feel like a day-to-day thing that we would do. It started to become more and more like that. We started to have a calmer family. The kids were calmer. The kids were much more relaxed about stuff. Kids felt that when things weren't right, or like Rebecca's fantastic.
They can pick up on it.
It's just she goes like, oh, well, can we pray about it? And she's, I always find kids' prayers are one of the most touching things to kind of get into. Like they are just so genuine and so heartfelt that there's something always true about that. But I think the biggest change I noticed personally was in my work life. And like it or not, I don't know why I managed to do this in my life. I've always somehow been a leader, be it sport teams, be it in work and stuff like that. At the time of shifting and really putting focus into Jesus was one of the hardest times in my career, where I was in a company that was not in a good space, and I was kind of thrust into a leadership position to try and rescue a very sinking ship. There was just basically no hope. but I leaned so heavily into the word and into God, it actually put my focus onto almost the idea of like save who you can save type of thing. So I became so focused on people and helping people and getting through stuff. It actually helped my leadership style massively. And through it, it guided me on a path which led me today to where I'm able to now lead an organization which I've dreamt of working for and being part of. Like I never thought I would get to the space where I am now, but the leadership that I do now is built and framed around that journey of walking that journey and what I'm still walking through with God and focusing on that. Like what would Jesus do in that sounds it's so cliche, but like often sometimes in like difficult leadership circumstances, I've actually got to kind of go, what is the right thing here? Read scripture, listen to worship or something just to kind of help me frame how to deal with this problem I'm about to walk into at the moment. And often even dealing with people, it's also softened me massively. I mean, if you had to speak to my wife, which I know that often people specifically know me for a long time and know this is, I was a very hard person growing up. It's just how my parents raised me. It's kind of how we were raised, but it became a lot softer and being able to deal with people's emotions and being able to understand people a lot better through this walk of life. And I feel like that was one of the biggest things that it changed me personally and stuff.
That's fantastic, man. And obviously with the Christian journey, and everybody will have a kind of a different story and experiences that have shaped them and that maybe gets them to lean towards something more than something else. So maybe from your kind of perspective and the lessons you've learned and the journey that you've been on, which involves, great growth, it involves radical serving, being so involved with our worship ministry. If you were to encounter another believer or chat to somebody else and you could give them a piece of advice, but almost based on something that you've learned or a journey that God's taken you on, what would that piece of advice be?
That it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. I feel like that's something which often is misunderstood. I think for a new believer, often the changes that come are and you can always feel they're the right changes. They're just often the ones that are the most difficult to make, if that makes sense. Sometimes it's losing a friend. Sometimes it's changing your habits. Sometimes it's giving up something that you do every evening to rather focus on more positive things or focus on reading the Bible. Maybe it's changing your lifestyle. Like there are often, if I kind of go back to the journey, the best and the most impactful things that happened and changed my life is when I listened to what God was telling me to do. And it was not, and sometimes I go there like, really, like, do I really have to do that? Is this really what you want me to do? Like, I really enjoy, like, I enjoy playing games. Like, it's just one of the things I enjoy doing. And it was way worse back in the day compared to now. But like, just going like, I can't do it all the time. I've actually got to focus on where am I serving. So worship became like a big, not a replacement's the right word, but like it became a far bigger focus for me than where my focus was. And this is one small practical example of it. The hard things came in life of going, what friends are not really the friends you should be hanging out with? What is your circle like? Is your circle building you up? Is your circle Christ-centered? Is your circle actually providing and giving you, your family, the right surroundings to build faithful children? That was hard because there are some people we've had to cut ties with that when it happened, it was not great. But when it had happened, it was a massive relief. And then all of a sudden it opened up the eyes going like, wow, actually we should have done this a long time ago. Our focuses were so skewed. We were not in the right space. We needed to be focusing here. And I think, sorry, to kind of sum up like that, I think the biggest advice is you got to listen to God, honestly. And it sounds so cliched, but if you quieten down, you just listen, and sometimes it's really not the advice you want to hear, but it's actually the right advice. Then it's actually the best way to do it.
That's so well put, and I couldn't agree more. And maybe even just as we begin to close, in my last question, just to chat a bit about worship, because it's a huge part of your life, and working closely with you in worship, I can see how much you care about it and are invested in it. And we have an amazing team at Revive Church that we get to serve with and to worship with. What role has worship played for you? Because there's been different levels. I mean, you weren't always a part of a leadership group. They would have been just playing and taking it from there. But could you maybe even summarize what worship has been for you in your journey?
I feel like we're going to need an hour, but I'll try and do it in 10 minutes. Worship, I think what's not always totally understood from maybe on my side or from others, like looking in, worship is like my entire family's like thing. Like it's become like our family thing. I mean, Chantal doesn't serve in the worship team, but I can tell you she's as equally involved behind the scenes in everything which we talk about. Oh no, it's hectic. The choices of music, the discussions, like it is an everyday discussion in our home is about worship all the time around stuff. And even the kids love worship, and it's like often in our house, I'm busy practicing for a Sunday and the kids are around me dancing and singing and having an absolute ball. And I should probably get Chantal to take a video one day and just throw it into Facebook so people can see the behind the scenes of what actually happens here.
I think you guys should definitely do that. That would be great.
Ava's been jamming we have a new song coming out on Sunday. It's called I Thank God, which is such a great meaning song. And she's jamming to that one so hard. But worship, I think to fully explain this, I think let's go back to, and that's going to be a bit of a story, but let's go back to why I started to play guitar. And I kind of really look back at my life at this moment and I go, it was a pivotal moment of my life. And it was a very difficult time in my life. When I was 18, I snapped my ankle clean off, basically, and my leg and everything, basically completely just gone. So I went from 7 days a week on the cusp of like province and like really pushing, like I was even got was even talk about going county cricket. Like that cricket was like my focus. It was literally all I did. I eat bread and I just did cricket. That's all I did. And then to go from like one day to literally the next day of being on my back and not being able to move was hectic. I took 3 surgeries, 2 years before I was able to run again. And in the really bad space, my mom, and bless her for like kind of just seeing like the problem. I was obviously depressed. I was obviously not in a good space mentally with stuff. In our household, we didn't speak about God and stuff. My parents always raised us in a really strong and powerful way, and an emotional way, and always was very centered around like good, like good upbringing and like good values and stuff like that. What they were always really good at doing was kind of helping us get through our stuff, even if it was maybe just in our own stead, but we got through a lot of things. And she kind of took out her 12-string acoustic from 30 years ago and just said, to do something with it. Hit the wall with it, hit yourself with it, play on it, learn something, off you go. And I did. I started to play. An old friend of mine, which is part of our church, Natalie Gillum, which is Reese's wife. We were friends for years in high school, and she knew how to play electric to that extent. And kind of from there, and at 18, I just started to play guitar. It was the most difficult part of my life. I hated it. I was depressed. I was not in a good space with it. But if that moment didn't happen, when I became, I think was 28 or 20, no, I've been probably close to 30, 35 now, so 31 or 30, when I actually started to play worship, I would never have played worship. It would never have been something in my life. I could never think of why I would have picked up a guitar. I was not interested. I could not even have given anything to play guitar. All I wanted to is play cricket. So kind of fast forwarding that, I look back now and I go, geez, God, you put something onto my mom's heart that she would never have maybe known or understood then, but you put that instrument in my hand that became something 13 years later. I would never understand why my ankle had to be broken or why I had to have my entire cricket career kind of like cut short. I will never get it. It was a really hard part of my life. But then I look now and I go, that was your plan. Your plan was for me to be on worship. Your plan was for me to be more Christ and God-centered in my family, to help raise a family like this. And at the heart of it is worship, because it is what I live and breathe every single day for Sunday and for our fantastic congregation and community. And taking over worship leadership was an incredibly daunting prospect. I'll never forget the phone call, the ask for you guys to me to do that. Thought you were crazy. My wife just thought you were crazy. She was like, no way this is happening. And I was like, it's happening. We're doing it. But like kind of taking on the leadership at a space where our worship was kind of collapsed a bit, right? It was not, we weren't in the best place with it. And I was incredibly daunted, but at that stage, we leaned so heavily into God, and we leaned so heavily into like really putting everything at God's feet. I actually said to Chantal, you know what, we're just going to pray about it, because I actually can't. I don't know what to do. We're just going to pray about it. And we prayed. We prayed really hard, and I had a really good circle of people close to me. So Jeff being obviously very close to us, specifically at that stage, like he was also new to the church, and just kind of building that up. And all of a sudden we started to see people coming in, and we started to see, we started doing jam nights, and then we had 20, 30. Now we have something like close to 30 members in our worship team, where I know when I started, we could struggle to fill 4 people onto a stage. And now I've got too many people. I don't know what to do with them. Actually, I'm struggling right now. I don't know how to make sure I have enough space to fill people up. And I look back and I go, that's God. God made this happen.
Sure.
And we've just lent heavily into it. And what worship does for me on a personal level, and I was talking to my life group about this, because a question was asked in our life group about where are you feeling spiritually right now. And we had a really good year last year as a family. We had a lot of deaths in our family, which was really hard to deal with, but in the spiritual sense, in the work sense, in the family sense, we actually had like a really good year. And I'm at the moment, and I'm scared of losing that, and I'm feeling like I'm in a really good relationship space with God at the moment, and I'm talking often and praying often, and feeling really centered, and just scared about losing it. So like a hyper focus on it at the moment. But around my life group, there was different answers. People going, I feel like I'm in a desert and I'm looking for God. I feel like I need more. I feel like, and everyone kind of looked at me. It's like, how are you doing? I was like, well, I don't mean to feel like the only guy in the room to say I'm feeling good, but I'm feeling good. Like I'm actually really in a good space. And they asked me like, how? And it's like, well, I said, if I had to do something practical, because the practical stuff often is like read your Bible more, which is spot on, pray more, which is spot on, all those things. So like what I do, which is slightly added to that, is in the preparation for a worship set on a Sunday, in playing or creating a worship set, is a lot of leaning into God, right? And a lot of leaning into the Word, and a lot of leaning into it. So I've given the group a bit of a challenge to kind of say, come up with a worship set. And my encouragement on how to do that is, if you're in a car in traffic, just listen to worship and just quieten your mind and actually just think about what the words are telling you. Think about what you're going through and how it applies to you. And as you kind of just let it go, and it kind of lets the worship and the music and like the focus of it take over you, you get it. You get, the emotional feelings of it. It's just what drives me and like drives a person from like to get through it. And I'm looking forward to catching with them tonight to kind of see how they did and how many of them have done it. Putting together a worship set is incredibly, not difficult is the right word, but it's not just about picking 4 songs. Like it really isn't. Like we really focus heavily on making sure that we choose songs that are relevant. And then even in preparation for it, it's not just about learning the chords. Often I spend more time focusing on what the words are. Like, what is it talking to me right now? What is it telling me right now? And then praying into like what I'm hearing. So worship's almost become almost my language with God, if that makes sense. Yeah. I know Roxy spoke about love language and stuff. Like I feel like worship's my love language with God. It's really kind of what's I'm focusing on massively, and it's my way of connecting with God. I think the key thing I think I would love to leave with people is worship is just not on a Sunday. Worship is Monday to Sunday. And that's the biggest thing. I want to encourage people to remember that.
Very good. Well, Carl, thank you so much, man. We really appreciate you jumping on with us. Our first of many Revive stories, hopefully, and just hearing from the fantastic people in our church. Everybody's got a story. We know our testimonies are so powerful, and even when you think about evangelism and sharing your story, I think sometimes we get stuck in the idea that it's got to be on a stage or with a microphone or on a soapbox somewhere. But even little videos like these where we can just unpack and chat and even reflect on what God has done in our lives. This is evangelism. This is sharing and getting it out there. So I hope that anybody that's watched this today has been encouraged and inspired. And we hope to do a lot more. But Carl, thank you so much. Appreciate it, man.
Pleasure. Thanks for the time.
Fantastic. Well, cheers, everybody. We hope you enjoyed the video.